The entire gym laughed at me when I walked in wearing my old sneakers. They thought I was just a washed-up grandfather, but they had no idea who I really was. The buzz of the crowd was deafening, banners swaying from the rafters, sneakers squeaking against polished hardwood. It was game night, the biggest one of the season. Parents cheered, kids waved posters, and the air smelled like popcorn and victory. And then I walked in. An old man in a faded varsity jacket, the same one I wore 4 decades ago, and sneakers that looked like they'd survived a war. I heard the chuckles ripple through the bleachers. Some parents leaned in to whisper, others laughed outright. Even my own family shifted uncomfortably, as if my presence was an embarrassment. But I wasn't here for them. I was here for my grandson, Ethan. He was on that court, nervous, restless, trying to prove himself. He didn't know that I'd once stood in his shoes, literally. He didn't know that the very court where he now struggled had once been mine. And as I watched his team stumble, panic, and fall behind, I realized something. They all thought I was just an old man clinging to memories. But before this night ended, they were going to learn the truth. The scoreboard hadn't even hit 5 minutes, and Ethan's team was already down by 10. Their offense was sloppy, their defense worse. The boys were talented, but raw, jumping for flashy shots instead of steady plays. The coach barked from the sidelines, waving his arms like a man drowning, but his words only made them more frantic. I sat quietly, watching. Every missed rebound, every reckless pass, it was all too familiar. I'd seen it decades ago when I led my own team into championship games. The crowd only saw failure. I saw the cracks, the mistakes, the rhythm falling apart. Ethan's shoulders sagged as he missed another three-pointer. The crowd groaned. His teammates glanced at him with frustration. And then, he looked at me, just for a heartbeat. His eyes, wide and searching, caught mine across the noise and chaos. He didn't want to admit it, but he needed help. I tightened my grip on the bleacher's edge. My pulse quickened. This was the moment. I could stay silent, let them drown, let everyone keep laughing at the old man in sneakers. Or I could stand up and show them who I truly was. I leaned forward, ready to rise, when suddenly, a mocking voice rang out behind me. "Hey, Grandpa, sit down before you break a hip." The laughter that followed echoed louder than the referee's whistle. And that's when I knew. This game was about to become more than just basketball. The laughter behind me cut deeper than I cared to admit. My hands curled into fists, my knuckles pale against the worn wood of the bleachers. I forced myself to stay calm, to breathe. Years of life had taught me patience, but that patience was wearing thin. "Dad, maybe just stay seated," my daughter whispered, leaning toward me without meeting my eyes. Her voice carried the same tone people use when they want someone to disappear without making a scene. I nodded, but the sting burned in my chest. Not even my own blood wanted me visible. On the court, Ethan dribbled nervously, his movements quick but uncertain. He drove toward the basket, leapt, and the ball clanged against the rim. The crowd groaned again. One of his teammates shouted in frustration. Ethan's face flushed red. The opposing team's parents clapped and jeered. I could almost feel Ethan shrinking under the weight of it all. I knew that feeling too well. I had once been the kid everyone doubted, the one who had to fight for respect every single game. As the second quarter began, the score gap widened. Ethan's team was falling apart. The coach stormed up and down the sideline, his voice cracking with desperation. Nothing was working. And yet, as I watched, a strange calm came over me. The rhythm of the game unfolded before my eyes like sheet music. I could see the openings, the patterns, the mistakes the boys didn't even know they were making. My instincts, the ones buried under years of silence, awoke. For the first time in decades, my blood raced the way it used to under the arena lights. I leaned forward, my voice low, muttering the corrections I knew could change everything. But no one listened. Not yet. And then Ethan stumbled again, this time colliding with an opponent and crashing to the floor. The crowd gasped. He stayed down, clutching his leg. I was on my feet before I realized it, my voice cutting through the noise. "Box out, Ethan. Stay low and control the lane." Heads turned. My family froze. Ethan looked up at me, pain in his eyes, but also recognition. He knew I wasn't just shouting empty words. The gym fell strangely quiet, as if waiting for what would happen next. The gym erupted in noise again as Ethan limped toward the bench. His coach barked at him to shake it off, but I could see the way Ethan avoided eye contact. He was rattled. His confidence was collapsing with every second that ticked off the clock. From behind me, another parent snorted. Guess basketball doesn't run in the family, huh? The laughter that followed made my jaw tighten. I wanted to turn around, to silence them with a single sentence, but I stayed still. Years of being underestimated had taught me one thing. The loudest person in the room is rarely the smartest. But then I heard my grandson's own teammates grumble. Man, Ethan's killing us out there. Bench him already. Their words sliced through me like knives. Ethan sat on the far end of the bench, shoulders slumped, his hands covering his face. My daughter crossed her arms, whispering to her husband, "This is embarrassing." He nodded, smirking. Embarrassing. That was what I had become to them. A burden, a relic, an unwanted reminder of something they'd rather forget. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I wasn't in this noisy gym. I was 19 again, standing on the same polished hardwood, the ball in my hands, the crowd chanting my name. I remembered the sweat, the roar of the crowd, the feeling of being alive, unstoppable. And I remembered the promise I made to myself the day I walked off this court for the last time. Never let them take your love for the game away. When I opened my eyes, the scoreboard read 42-19. Ethan's team was being destroyed. Parents shook their heads, some already gathering their coats as if the game was a lost cause. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, heart pounding. This wasn't just about basketball anymore. This was about Ethan, about showing him who he came from, about proving to every sneering face in that gym that the old man in sneakers wasn't finished yet. And that's when the coach, red-faced and furious, threw his clipboard down and shouted, "If you kids don't figure this out, we're going to lose by 50. The boys stared at him, blank and hopeless. The gym fell into uneasy silence. I stood. Every head turned. Parents, players, even the referee. My daughter's voice trembled. "Dad, sit down, please." But I didn't, because I knew something they didn't. The game wasn't over. Not even close. The coach's voice cracked as he yelled, pacing back and forth like a man on fire. His players stared blankly, their shoulders slumped, their eyes empty. He was losing them, and everyone could see it. "Why don't you just quit already?" Someone from the opposing bleachers shouted. Laughter followed. It burned through me like acid. I stood tall, ignoring my daughter's frantic tug on my sleeve. "Dad, sit down before you embarrass us more," she whispered sharply. But embarrassment had already reached its peak. Nothing they could say now would cut deeper than it already had. I looked toward Ethan. He sat on the bench, gripping a water bottle with trembling hands. His face was pale, his lips pressed tight. His teammates glared at him as if he were the problem. And then his eyes found mine. Just a flicker, just a second, but it was enough. I cupped my hands around my mouth and called out, loud and clear, "Set your screens tighter, Ethan. Don't rush your shot. Control the lane." The words echoed through the gym. The crowd quieted, surprised. Ethan froze, staring at me, wide-eyed. The coach whipped his head toward me, his face red with fury. "Sit down, old man," he snapped, his voice cracking louder than the buzzer. "You're not the coach here." A murmur rippled through the bleachers. Parents exchanged glances, some smirking, others shaking their heads. My daughter buried her face in her hands. But Ethan looked at me differently this time. He didn't roll his eyes, didn't turn away. He nodded, just slightly, before jogging back onto the court. The next play began. Ethan moved differently, sharper, more controlled. He set a strong screen, giving his teammates space to drive. They scored. The crowd erupted, shocked at the sudden burst of life. I felt my chest tighten, my pulse pounding. It was working, but the coach wasn't done with me. He stormed across the sideline, pointing a finger in my direction. "One more word, and you're out of here," he shouted. The crowd gasped. The referee glanced toward me, unsure. My family glared, mortified. I could feel every eye in the gym burning into me. The choice was mine, stay silent or keep fighting. And as I looked at the scoreboard, the faintest flicker of hope rising for Ethan's team, I knew my decision was already made. The coach's finger was still pointed at me, his face red and pulsing with anger. The gym had gone almost silent, everyone waiting to see what I would do. My daughter whispered, "Please, Dad, stop." My son-in-law chuckled, "This is pathetic." But when I looked back at the court, I saw Ethan. He was standing tall, chest rising and falling with determination. He was waiting for me, I took a slow breath, my voice steady and strong. Play smart, Ethan. Trust the ball, not the crowd. The gym erupted in gasps. The coach threw his arms in the air. That's it. You're out, he screamed, signaling to the referee. But the ref hesitated. The play had already begun. Ethan dribbled down the court, his movements sharp and controlled. He passed to a teammate, set a screen, and the basket swished clean through. The crowd cheered. For the first time that night, they were cheering for him. The coach froze, his fury swallowed by the sudden spark of life on his team. Parents leaned forward, whispering to each other. My family glared at me as if I had just ruined everything. But the scoreboard told a different story. 42-23. The comeback had begun. Ethan looked at me again, and this time, his nod wasn't hesitant. It was solid, defiant. The coach tried to take control, but the boys were already listening differently, watching Ethan, following his lead. My words carried farther than I realized. Every correction, every reminder I called out struck home. Slow down. Set the pick. Find the open man. And with every possession, the gap shrank. I could feel it in my chest. The old fire, the rhythm of the game, the pulse of victory. The crowd started to shift. The laughter was gone. People weren't mocking me anymore. They were watching me. But just as hope began to spread through the gym, the buzzer rang for halftime. The scoreboard glowed, 46-33. Still losing, but no longer hopeless. And as the boys jogged toward the locker room, Ethan turned his head one last time, eyes locked on mine. He mouthed a single word. Don't stop. The buzzer's echo faded, and the players disappeared into the locker room. The gym settled into a restless murmur. Parents stretching, students chatting, cheerleaders shuffling off to the side. But my heart still raced like I was about to step back onto the court myself. I didn't even notice the coach storming toward me until his shadow fell across my row of bleachers. His face was crimson, sweat dripping down his temples. You think you're clever, old man? He hissed, his voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. One more word, and I'll have security drag you out of here. This is my team, not yours. Parents nearby leaned closer, hungry for drama. My daughter buried her face in her hands, whispering, Dad, please, just stop. My son-in-law added, smirking, You're ruining everything. People are laughing at us. I didn't answer them. My eyes stayed locked on the coach. He was younger than me, barely in his 40s, stocky, the kind of man who believed volume could replace wisdom. But the way his voice shook betrayed him. He wasn't just angry. He was scared. Because he knew what I knew. His boys had started listening to me. You've had 2 quarters, I said quietly, so only he could hear. And they're down by 13. Maybe the problem isn't me. His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. He turned on his heel, storming back toward the locker room. The gym buzzed again. Parents whispered, some smirking at me, others shaking their heads in disbelief. But for the first time, I saw a few nods. A few faces that weren't laughing. On the bench, Ethan's water bottle sat forgotten, droplets rolling down the plastic like sweat. I reached for it, holding it in my hands, remembering all the games I'd played, the nights I bled for this sport, the moments that had defined me. I wasn't going to let this be the end. Not for Ethan. Not for me. The locker room doors swung open, and the boys jogged back onto the court. Their faces looked different now. Tired, yes, but also lit with something I hadn't seen before. Hope. The second half was about to begin, and I knew this was where everything would change. The whistle blew, and the boys jogged onto the court to start the third quarter. The scoreboard glared, 46-33. Still a mountain to climb, but no longer impossible. Ethan took his position, shoulders squared, his eyes flicking toward me in the stands. For the first time tonight, he didn't look ashamed to acknowledge me. He looked ready. The ball was inbound. Immediately, I saw the same mistakes forming, the sloppy screens, the rushed passes. My instincts flared. I leaned forward, cupping my hands around my mouth. Slow it down. Find your rhythm. The words cut through the noise. Ethan heard me. He dribbled with more patience this time, waiting, scanning. His teammate moved into place. Ethan passed, cut, and circled back into the paint. The ball came back to him. He rose, calm and balanced, and the shot dropped clean through the hoop. The crowd erupted. My daughter shot me a glare sharp enough to kill, but I barely noticed. My grandson was listening, and it was working. Play after play, my voice carried. Set your pick tighter. Stay low on defense. Watch the rebound. Ethan absorbed every word. And slowly, the team began to mirror him. His confidence spread like fire, and his teammates fed on it. The gap started to close. 48-37. Then 50-42. The crowd leaned forward, sensing momentum. Even parents who had mocked me earlier were now cheering when Ethan scored. The opposing coach shouted, trying to steady his players, but frustration seeped into their game. Missed shots, fouls, sloppy turnovers. It was all unraveling. Ethan stole the ball, sprinted down the court, and slammed it in. The gym exploded. Students leapt from the bleachers. Parents roared. The floor shook beneath my feet. I stood, heart pounding. My chest swelled with pride, my voice louder than it had been in years. But just as Ethan jogged back, grinning for the first time that night, I caught sight of the other coach signaling furiously at the referee. The officials huddled, pointing toward me. The head referee started walking in my direction. The referee marched toward me, whistle dangling from his neck, his face stern. The gym buzzed with whispers, some cheering, some jeering, all waiting to see what would happen. "You," the ref barked, pointing straight at me. "Sit down and stop coaching, or you're out of this gym." Gasps rippled through the bleachers. My daughter clutched my arm, her voice frantic. "Dad, don't push this any further. Please." My son-in-law smirked as if he'd been waiting for this. Finally, about time someone shut him up. But Ethan's voice broke through the noise. From the court, loud and defiant. "He's not hurting anyone. Let him stay?" The gym fell silent. All eyes swung toward Ethan. His teammates nodded, standing with him. Even the opposing players seemed unsettled by the sudden shift. The referee hesitated. His eyes flicked to the coach, who was seething on the sideline, face red, fists clenched. Then back to me, standing tall in my faded jacket, my old sneakers planted firm. "This is your warning," the ref growled. "One more word, and you're gone. Understand?" I gave him a slow nod, though my heart thundered in my chest. As he turned back toward the court, the murmurs rose again. Parents whispered, some shooting me dirty looks, others glancing at me with something closer to respect. The game resumed, and though I stayed quiet for the next few plays, my presence hung heavy in the gym. Ethan knew I was still there, still watching, still guiding with every nod, every look, every gesture. And when the next timeout was called, I caught his eyes across the floor. He mouthed 2 words, lips firm, voice unshaken even in silence. "Don't stop." The third quarter wound down, and something electric filled the air. Ethan's team, once dragging their feet, now moved with sharper focus. They weren't just reacting, they were anticipating, adjusting, fighting like they belonged out there. The score ticked closer, 52-46, then 54-50. The crowd, which had been half asleep and resigned to defeat, leaned forward on the bleachers, every basket pulling them further into hope. I kept my mouth shut, remembering the ref's warning, but my eyes and gestures were enough. A nod when Ethan looked my way, a subtle hand motion, reminding him of spacing, of patience. He understood. He trusted me now. But not everyone in the gym was pleased. From 2 rows back, I heard a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. Now the old man thinks he's some kind of savior. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could feel the jealousy dripping from every word. Beside me, my daughter sat stiff, arms crossed tight against her chest. My son-in-law muttered, "This is ridiculous. He's making us look like fools." They weren't talking about the game anymore. They were talking about me. But on the court, Ethan was alive. He sank a mid-range jumper, then fought for a rebound, his energy igniting his teammates. When he drew a foul and sank both free throws, the scoreboard flashed, 56-54. Only 2 points down. The gym roared. The sound rattled my bones, and for the first time in years, I felt that old, familiar rush, the thrill of a comeback, the taste of something bigger than a game. And then, in the final seconds of the quarter, Ethan stole the ball. The clock ticked down. 5 seconds. 4. He sprinted, weaving past defenders, the crowd screaming. 3. 2. He rose at the three-point line, released. The buzzer blared. The ball arced through the air, spinning, and the net swished clean. The gym exploded. Students stormed the railings. Parents leapt to their feet. Ethan's teammates mobbed him as he pumped his fists. 59-56. They were winning. I exhaled, gripping the edge of the bleacher. My chest heaved, my throat tight, my vision stung with tears I refused to let fall. But as the fourth quarter loomed, I knew one thing for certain. The fight wasn't over. The hardest part was still to come. The gym was trembling with noise. My ears rang with the chants, "Defense! Defense!" The students stomped their feet, the bleachers rattling beneath us. Ethan's team had clawed back from humiliation to a 3-point lead, but the fourth quarter was just starting, and the other side wasn't about to roll over. The opposing coach bellowed, rallying his players. They stormed the court with fury, crashing into screens, shoving, pressing harder than ever. Within 2 minutes, the lead was gone. The scoreboard flashed, 61-61. Parents gasped, groaned, covered their mouths. My daughter muttered, "It's slipping again. This is over." My son-in-law smirked, "Told you. Temporary luck. He's still the same loser." But Ethan wasn't the same. Not anymore. Sweat streamed down his face, but his eyes burned with fire. Every glance he threw at me was sharp, hungry, alive. He wasn't just looking for approval now. He was demanding it. I rose to my feet, ignoring the referee's warning still echoing in my head. I didn't shout, but I let my voice carry just enough for Ethan to hear. "Stay calm. Trust your team. Lead them." And he did. He called out plays, set up screens, forced passes into the right hands. His confidence spread like wildfire. His teammates moved sharper, faster. Shots dropped. Defenders held the line. 64-61. 66-63. 68-65. The crowd roared with every basket. My chest tightened, my hands trembling as memories slammed into me. Me at 19, sinking shots, the gym shaking, the world believing in me. I felt alive again, as if all those lost years had melted away. But then, disaster struck. Ethan drove to the basket, leaping high, only to be slammed to the floor by a brutal foul. The whistle blew. The crowd erupted in outrage. Ethan clutched his shoulder, grimacing, teeth clenched. He staggered to his feet, wobbling, eyes flickering toward me with pain. The trainer rushed forward. The coach threw his hands up, yelling at the refs. Parents gasped, murmured, prayed aloud. And I froze. The question hit me like a blow. Had I pushed him too far? The trainer crouched beside Ethan, pressing a hand to his shoulder. My grandson winced, teeth clenched so tight his jaw trembled. The gym, moments ago deafening, hushed into an uneasy silence. "Can he play?" the coach demanded, though his voice cracked with panic more than authority. The trainer shook his head. "He's sore, but nothing's broken. It's his call." Ethan's eyes darted around, wide and clouded with doubt. His teammates whispered, shuffling nervously. Parents muttered in the stands, some sympathetic, others impatient. My daughter pressed her palms together, whispering, "Please, Ethan, just sit down." And me? For the first time all night, I hesitated. Had I pushed him too far? Had my pride, my desperate need to prove myself, put Ethan in danger? My chest ached with guilt. Maybe I really was just a selfish old man clinging to the past. But then Ethan stood, slowly, shakily, but with fire in his eyes. He waved the trainer off. "I'm fine," he growled, voice low but firm. The crowd erupted in cheers. The coach shook his head. "Kid, you can't." "I can't," Ethan snapped back. His voice echoed across the gym, silencing even his own teammates. And then, almost instinctively, he looked at me. Our eyes locked. His message was clear. This isn't just your fight anymore. It's mine too. I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. This wasn't me forcing him. This was him choosing to stand tall, no matter the pain. The whistle blew, and Ethan jogged back onto the court. His steps were uneven, his arms stiff, but his spirit was unbroken. The crowd rose to their feet, chanting his name. "Ethan! Ethan! Ethan!" And as he lined up for his free throws, he turned his head ever so slightly, just enough for me to see the faintest smile on his face. My heart thundered, but I knew the final minutes would demand more from him than he'd ever given before, and more from me than I'd thought I still had left. The scoreboard flashed, 68-67. Only 1 point separated the teams. The gym thundered with chants, every voice rising and falling with each possession. My heart hammered so loud I could barely hear myself think. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, his shoulders stiff but his eyes burning. He dribbled with focus, passing, cutting, directing his teammates like a true leader. Every move carried purpose. Every step reminded me of myself decades ago. The opposing team tightened their defense, swarming him every time he touched the ball. They wanted to break him, physically and mentally. Twice, he was shoved to the floor, the ref's whistle swallowed in the chaos. The crowd erupted in outrage, but Ethan just gritted his teeth and got back up. From across the gym, he found me again. Just one look. I didn't speak, couldn't risk ejection, but I gave a slow nod. Calm. Steady. Trust yourself. He nodded back, jaw tight. The next possession, Ethan drove the lane, then kicked the ball out to a teammate. Swish, 3 points. The gym exploded. His teammates swarmed him, slapping his back, their confidence renewed. But the other team wasn't done. They answered with a 3 of their own. Then another. With every basket, the tension ratcheted higher, the lead bouncing back and forth like a pendulum. 71-70. 73-72. 74-73. Parents clutched their heads, students screamed until their voices broke, cheerleaders shook their pom-poms frantically. My hands trembled as I gripped the bleacher, my knees weak beneath me. With under a minute left, the score stood locked, 76-76. The coach called a timeout, his face pale, sweat dripping from his forehead. His players huddled around him, but I could see it, they weren't listening. Not to him. Their eyes were on Ethan. And Ethan? His eyes were on me. The whistle blew. Final possession. The ball in Ethan's hands. The gym fell into a hush, as if the entire town held its breath at once. And in that silence, my heart whispered the truth I'd been denying all night. This wasn't just his moment. It was mine too. The gym vibrated with tension. The scoreboard glowed, 76-76. Final seconds. The ball was in Ethan's hands. The coach barked out orders, waving his arms wildly, but the boys weren't looking at him anymore. Their eyes were on Ethan, and Ethan's eyes, steady, unwavering, found mine. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I lifted one hand slowly, pointing to the basket, then closed it into a fist. He understood. The whistle blew. The clock ticked. 10 seconds. Ethan dribbled past half court, guarded tight. 9. His teammate set a shaky screen. Ethan slipped left. 8. The crowd screamed, voices blurring into a single roar. 7. He crossed over, faked, drove. 6. The lane collapsed with defenders. He spun, pulling back. 5. My chest pounded so hard it hurt. Sweat beaded on my palms. 4. Ethan stepped back behind the arc, the entire gym on its feet. 3. He rose, his form clean, shoulders square despite the pain in his arm. 2. The ball left his fingertips, spinning, rising, hanging in the air. The buzzer blared. Time froze. The gym went silent. All I could hear was the thunder of my own heartbeat. The ball traced its arc, a perfect rainbow, falling toward the rim. Ethan's eyes locked on mine one last time. And in that instant, I felt it. Not just as his grandfather, not just as an old man clinging to the past, but as a player who knew the taste of destiny. The ball descended. It kissed the rim, and everything exploded. The ball dropped through the net with a perfect swish. For half a heartbeat, the gym was silent, stunned, breathless, before it exploded. The crowd surged to its feet, screaming so loud the bleachers shook beneath us. Students waved their arms. Parents shouted Ethan's name, the sound rattling every corner of the building. Ethan's teammates swarmed him, lifting him off the floor as he pumped his fists in the air. The scoreboard glowed, 79-76. Victory. My daughter's hand slipped from her face, eyes wide in shock. My son-in-law's smirk vanished, replaced by something sour, almost afraid. Around them, the same parents who had mocked me earlier were now clapping, some even turning to nod at me, their respect reluctant but undeniable. On the sideline, the opposing coach kicked his clipboard, muttering curses, his fury drowned out by the roar of celebration. And the referee, who had threatened to throw me out, only shook his head, as if realizing that sometimes rules bend to destiny. But Ethan didn't look at any of them. Carried on his teammates' shoulders, sweat dripping, smile blazing, he turned his head across the gym and found me. His eyes shone, not with embarrassment anymore, but pride, gratitude, victory. And in that moment, all the laughter, all the whispers, all the humiliation I had endured melted away. I wasn't the old man in sneakers anymore. I was Henry, his grandfather, the man who still knew the game. The chants echoed louder and louder. Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. And for the first time in years, I let a single tear fall, not from regret, but from pride so fierce it nearly broke me. But as the celebration raged, I noticed the way my family stayed seated, stiff and cold, their faces tight with something far different from joy. Because for them, this victory wasn't just Ethan's. It was mine. The gym was still vibrating with cheers when the final buzzer echoed. Ethan's team had won. Students rushed the court. Parents clapped each other on the back. The cheerleaders screamed until their voices cracked. It was chaos, joy, triumph. But I didn't move. I stayed seated, watching my grandson bask in the glory he had earned. The way his teammates hugged him, the way the crowd chanted his name, it wasn't just a victory. It was his becoming. Finally, Ethan broke away, pushing through the crowd. He jogged to the bleachers, sweat dripping, his chest heaving. And right there, in front of everyone, he wrapped his arms around me. "Thank you, Grandpa," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. I squeezed him tight, my throat burning. "No, Ethan, you did this. You proved them all wrong." The gym erupted again, but this time it wasn't just for him. It was for us. For what we represented. For what they'd all witnessed. When Ethan jogged back to his team, my daughter and her husband turned toward me. Their faces were pale, stiff with something bitter. My son-in-law muttered, "You shouldn't have interfered." My daughter added softly, "You embarrassed us." I smiled, calm, steady, unshaken. "Embarrassed you? Look around." I gestured to the gym, where parents who had laughed at me before now nodded with respect, some even clapping my shoulder as they passed. "You wanted me invisible," I continued quietly. "But tonight, you'll remember who I am. And so will Ethan." They said nothing. They couldn't. Their silence was my victory. As the crowd spilled out into the night, Ethan walked beside me, his head high, his voice steady. "You know, Grandpa," he said, grinning, "you've still got game." I chuckled, my old sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. "The game never leaves you, kid. Not if you love it enough." And as we stepped into the cool night air, the sounds of celebration still echoing behind us, I felt lighter than I had in decades. This wasn't just about basketball. It was about respect. And tonight, I had quietly taken it back. The next morning, the town was buzzing like a hive. By the time I walked into the corner store for my usual coffee, I could already hear people talking. Two kids in Letterman jackets stood by the register, replaying every second of Ethan's final shot, acting it out with invisible basketballs in their hands. "Man, did you see the look on their coach's face?" one laughed. "And Ethan's grandpa, did you hear him? He was like the secret weapon." I lowered my eyes, hiding a smile. They didn't recognize me, not in the morning quiet with my cap pulled low. But their words filled me with something warmer than the coffee I clutched. By noon, the local paper had a photo of Ethan on the front page. Wildcats' stunning comeback, last-second Three Seals victory. His grin beamed beneath the headline, his arms raised in triumph. The article praised the team, even credited the coach for finding the right adjustments at halftime. My stomach turned at that line. Adjustments? He had nearly lost them the game, and now he wanted the glory. When I arrived at my daughter's house that evening, the mood was sour despite the victory. Ethan was still at school, basking in his new hero status, but his parents sat stiff at the dining table. "You really shouldn't have interfered," my son-in-law said without looking up from his phone. His tone was sharp, clipped. "The coach is furious. You made a fool of him in front of the whole town." "And of us," my daughter added, her voice quiet but edged. People kept staring. "Do you know how humiliating that was?" I stared at them for a long moment, then chuckled softly. "Funny," I said. "I didn't hear humiliation last night. I heard a whole gym cheering." Their faces tightened. My son-in-law leaned forward, his voice low. "Don't get used to it. This was Ethan's win, not yours. Don't try to steal his spotlight." Before I could answer, the door swung open. Ethan bounded in, still wearing his practice gear, hair damp with sweat, eyes alight. He dropped his bag, rushed across the room, and hugged me tight. "Grandpa, they want me on the radio tomorrow morning. And Coach Miller wants me to lead warm-ups for the next game." His excitement filled the house, but what struck me most was what came next. Ethan pulled out the newspaper, slapped it on the table, and said proudly, "Everyone knows why we won. It was because of you." The room fell silent. My daughter's face paled. My son-in-law's jaw clenched. Ethan turned to them, his voice steady. He wasn't embarrassing. He saved us. For once, neither of them had a comeback. Later that night, when the house had quieted, Ethan found me on the porch. The stars glittered above, the crickets sang in the grass, and he sat beside me, his voice lower, more serious. "Grandpa," he said, "I want you to teach me. Not just tips during games. I want to learn. The way you see the court, it's different. It's special." My throat tightened. For years, I had been nothing more than a ghost of who I once was. Now, in my grandson's eyes, I was something else. A teacher, a guide, a legacy. I placed a hand on his shoulder, the same one that had taken the brutal foul just a night ago. "If you're serious," I said, "we'll start tomorrow. Not on a shiny gym floor, not under bright lights. On the old court by my house, where I learn what this game really means." He smiled, a spark in his eyes that told me he was ready. And as the night settled over us, I realized something. Last night wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of his, and I was finally part of it. But I also knew my family wouldn't let this go so easily. Their silence wasn't surrender. It was the calm before their storm. The old blacktop court near my house hadn't seen a game in years. The lines were faded. The hoop leaned slightly from decades of weather, and weeds sprouted through cracks in the asphalt. But to me, it was sacred ground, the place where I had learned discipline, patience, and the language of basketball. That morning, Ethan arrived in a fresh pair of sneakers, his gym bag slung over his shoulder. He looked out of place against the rust and weeds, shifting uncertainly. "This is it?" he asked, his voice half joking. "This is where champions are made," I replied, tossing him a ball so worn the leather had turned smooth. "Out here, there are no crowds, no referees, no excuses. Just you, the ball, and the work." For hours, I drilled him the way I had once drilled myself. Footwork first, balance second, shots last. He stumbled, sweated, cursed under his breath, but he never quit. And with each correction, each nod of encouragement, I saw him growing, not just as a player, but as a young man. By afternoon, his shirt clung to him, soaked through, his hair plastered to his forehead. He collapsed onto the cracked pavement, gasping. I didn't know it was this hard. I chuckled, sitting beside him. Anyone can shoot when the lights are bright. Real players are forged when no one's watching. He leaned back, staring at the rim with new respect. "Then I want to be real." Those words filled me more than any crowd's cheer ever had. But not everyone shared our joy. That evening, my daughter arrived, her arms crossed, her expression tight. "Dad, this needs to stop," she said, her voice trembling with frustration. "You're filling his head with nonsense. He's obsessed now. He barely listens to us anymore." Ethan, still dripping with sweat, stood his ground. "Mom, this isn't nonsense. Grandpa knows the game better than anyone. He's teaching me more than Coach Miller ever has." Her face flushed. "Do you hear yourself? He's turning you against your own family." "No," Ethan said firmly. "He's reminding me what family really means." Her silence was louder than any argument. She turned away, muttering something about bad influence as she stormed back to the car. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. For the first time in years, I realized I wasn't fighting for her approval anymore. I had already won the battle that mattered. That night, as the cicadas hummed and the court lay quiet again, Ethan stayed behind. He dribbled slowly, the ball echoing in the cool summer air. Then he stopped, looked at me, and said, "Grandpa, promise me you'll never stop. Even if they hate it. Even if everyone else laughs. Just don't stop teaching me." I swallowed hard, emotions tightening my throat. "I promise." We stood there, just the two of us under the flickering street lamp. The court was cracked, the hoop bent, the night ordinary to anyone else. But to me, it was everything. Because my revenge had never been about shouting or proving my family wrong in front of a crowd. It was about this, passing down what they could never take away from me. My knowledge, my legacy, my love. In the silence of that court, I realized the truth. Respect doesn't come from being seen. It comes from being remembered. And I knew, no matter how much they tried to erase me, they never could. Because Ethan would carry me forward. And that was victory enough. The next few days blurred into a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. Each morning, before the sun had fully risen, Ethan would bike over to my house, ball tucked under his arm, his breath steaming in the cool air. We'd walk down to the cracked blacktop together, where dew clung to the weeds pushing through the asphalt. I'd never seen him so determined. He tripped, he missed, he grew frustrated, but he refused to quit. Every stumble only fueled him. And as I corrected his footwork, reminded him about spacing, or demonstrated a simple pivot, I saw the spark grow brighter in his eyes. But that spark made others uneasy. On the third day, my daughter showed up again, standing by the chain-link fence with her arms crossed. "This is getting out of hand," she said sharply. "He should be focusing on school, on real priorities, not wasting his time on some old man's fantasies." Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead and shot back. "It's not a waste. I've learned more from Grandpa in 3 days than from Coach Miller all season." Her face hardened. "You don't understand. People are starting to talk. They think he's trying to relive his glory days through you. That he's—" She stopped, but her meaning was clear. That I was selfish, clinging to the past. I stepped forward, my voice steady. "If teaching my grandson discipline, respect, and hard work is selfish, then yes, I'll wear that proudly." Her lips pressed tight, and she turned away. But her silence spoke volumes. I had lost her approval long ago, and I wasn't sure I even wanted it anymore. That evening, after she left, Ethan sat beside me on the porch, the ball resting between his feet. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think you were just old. Like, stuck in your ways. But now I see it. You've still got the game. Not just the skills, the heart." His words shook me. For years, I had lived as though my past was a relic, something better left hidden. But here was my grandson, asking me to bring it back to life, to pass it forward. That was more powerful than any applause from strangers. One night, after a long training session, we stayed late on the court. The street lamp flickered above us, casting long shadows on the asphalt. I showed him the same drill I'd practiced as a young man. Free throws in silence, one after another, no celebration, no frustration, just focus. Ethan shot. Swish. Another. Swish. And again. Finally, after his 10th in a row, he looked at me, his chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face. "Will it ever be enough?" he asked. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Enough isn't the point. The point is that you never stop trying. That's the game. That's life." He nodded, his eyes shining in the dim light, and I knew he understood. Back at the house, as we packed up, I noticed the shadow of my daughter's car parked down the street. She didn't get out, didn't speak. She just watched. Her face was hidden, but I didn't need to see it to know what she felt. Resentment, fear, maybe even jealousy. But I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt peace. Because she could hate me, dismiss me, erase me from her family photos if she wanted. But she couldn't erase what had already taken root in Ethan. As he left that night, he called back over his shoulder, his voice firm and certain. "Same time tomorrow, Grandpa." I smiled, standing beneath the flickering lamp, the cracked court behind me. My revenge was never about proving them wrong in one moment. It was about something quieter, stronger, lasting. Passing on what they could never steal, my knowledge, my love, my name carried forward through him. And as I turned toward home, the cool night air filling my lungs, I whispered to myself with a quiet smile, "They'll never forget me now."